This episode of ArTechník Podcast is brought to you by Amazon.com, which makes it super easy to support the podcast. Here's how it works. All you've got to do is go to our website, ArTechníkPodcast.com, and when you get there, you'll see a big button that says Shop on Amazon and Support the Podcast. Click on that button and it will take you right to Amazon.com, and all you have to do is shop as normal, and a percentage of your purchase will go to supporting the podcast with no extra cost to you. So there you go. Go to ArTechníkPodcast.com, click on the big Shop with Amazon button, and you will be supporting ArTechník Podcast. Thanks. ArTechník Podcast number 38 for December 23rd, 2012, the first annual State of the Artist Address. All right, welcome everybody. I'm Math Chris Shoes, and I would like to welcome you to News NN's coverage of the 2012 State of the Artist Address. I've got a couple of other pundits here with me. To my right.
Hello, this is Michael Radau.
Hello, Michael. All right, and to my left.
Brockett Coolidge.
All right, Brockett's joining us from Denver, where there's been a lot of coverage this year, and I've got to say, overall, gents, I think it's been a pretty up and downsy kind of year for artists in this country.
I agree. Many individual artists have struggled this year, both in creating viable content and being able to support themselves in a pleasurable way.
Yep. And I blame our race for oil. Don't you agree?
No. I think that while it has had some of its complications, I think overall this year has been quite good for the artist in general, and I think anyone who tries to say that this year has been detrimental to the...
Brockett, you're always gonna paint a rosy picture, Brockett, and I don't think you live in the real world, Brockett, and I think these upcoming speeches are gonna prove it.
I think we're going to hear a lot of promises made today, and I think some of those, depending on which group we're hearing from, are going to be kept or not kept as we proceed further into this new presidency, this new term, this new period of the podcast.
Yep. And let me just clue in our listeners on what they'll be about to hear. First, we're going to hear a speech from Secretary of Art, Aaron Gotlieb. He's going to talk about the climate of the artists this year. Then we're going to hear a little bit from the Secretary of Technology, Jef Holbrook. He'll be talking about the state of the artists and technology this year. And then, of course, we'll be leading up to the main event, the presidential address from the president of the podcast this year, Adam Montague.
I cannot wait to hear his Luddite perspective. Yes.
No, Luddite.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong word to throw out, but I can't completely disagree with him either.
It's true. Have you heard him speak before? It's awful.
I'm still wondering, why they didn't do a recount on the ballot myself.
I think if it wasn't for the mustache, he wouldn't have had any chance taking the presidency this year. I think that really was his driving force with the general populace.
Yes,
I agree. Well, all right. Looks like things are clearing up, and I see the Secretary of Art, Aaron Gotlieb, is approaching the podium. So we're gonna go over to that now. All right.
Hello, I'm Aaron Gotlieb, Secretary of Art for ArTechník Podcast. What does it mean to be an artist in 2012? What does it mean to be an artist at all? What is an artist is such a simple question, but it has an endlessly complicated answer. one that has been discussed and debated endlessly, and one I doubt very much I can wrap up in a 7-minute podcast address. But just because it doesn't have a tidy, finite answer doesn't mean the question shouldn't be asked. In fact, that is precisely why it should be asked over and over and over again. It is, in fact, our job as artists to ask such questions, or as scientists, or as humans. Sylvia White brings up the idea in her blog Art Advice that being an artist is not a career or a profession or a way to make a living. She considers the state of being an artist is not a choice, but merely a trait like hair color or height. This, in part, rings true to me. Creating art may be a profession, but existing as an artist is a state of being. It is an approach to life. It is one who consistently carries around that mirror one must hold up to nature. They are driven to create, to invent, reinvent, explore, experiment, and deconstruct. Yes, I hear artists thinking, it's so true, it's who I am, it's in my blood. Here is where this becomes incomplete for me. If being artistic is an inherent, unalterable trait, are there some people who are born unartistic, doomed, through no fault of their own, to live without that mythic creative spark we cherish so highly? People who could study the techniques and still come away as fakes, merely mimicking the work of artists. I can't believe this is the case. The act of living a life is an act of creation. Therefore, if one can live, one can create. Perhaps artists, then, are those that can create things of value. Art, for example. An artist is someone who creates art. But what defines the value? What makes art art? Well, that is a fractal discussion in and of itself. If a person only paints pictures of crying clowns their whole life and feels creative and joyous and fulfilled, are they less of an artist than one who paints abstractions no one has ever seen or even thought of before? What about someone who paints houses, not pictures of houses, a house painter? Or someone who packs boxes at a home delivery warehouse, but takes the time to arrange the items how they would hope to receive them? Is Justin Bieber less of an artist because he sings songs you don't like? If the value of a work of art must be universal and uniform, then so far there have never been any artists in the world. So, artists are those born with the trait of being artistic, everyone, and creating things of any value, including a life lived. All right, so artists are humans, and vice versa. There, done, solved. Well, except for those pesky elephants painting pictures, and bonobos making up words, and that computer program creating video games. Okay, so anyone and everything is an artist. Glad we could narrow that down. Maybe it's best we move away from the theoretical idea and come up with a more practical definition. What about one who chooses to make all or part of their living as an artist? Or, better yet, one who considers themselves to be an artist. Actually, I really like that one. If you have the stomach to look at all the difficulties, preconceived notions, judgments, hardships, and rewards of being known as an artist, and you still want the title, go for it. If that's the case, it seems to be a great time to be an artist. The variety of mediums and distribution paths are more numerous than they have ever been. YouTube is less than a decade old, but it has completely changed the distribution model for broadcasting video. Blogs, iTunes, ebooks, and all sorts of awkwardly capitalized tech have done the same for the other publishing platforms. Anyone, anywhere can get their message out. It doesn't mean it will be seen, but you no longer have to go through one of the traditional gatekeepers to share your work with the world, which is perfect. Unless you want to include making a living as in your artistic art definition. There was a time, and it wasn't very long ago, when art was one of the biggest businesses in the world. It still is, in its way. But then it was only financially valuable the way diamonds are. Most of it was held back by the distributors. Diamonds are many things, but rare is not one of them. If all of the diamonds held back from the markets were made available, their perceived scarcity and therefore perceived value would plummet. But on the other side, it means you don't have a major multi-million-dollar publishing giant handing your work directly and powerfully to a pre-established audience. You now have the freedom to connect directly with that perfect niche of patrons who want exactly what you are creating. But you have to find them yourself. And they've been trained that it's only financially valuable if it's packaged the way it always has been before. In that sense, it's a pretty rough time to be an artist, professionally. We have flooded the market with our creations, but now there doesn't seem to be a market for them. People don't want to pay for things of untested and abstract value. And why should they? Why should people pay to indulge our desire to paint or dance or act or program or fill in the blank with the myriad other art forms? If we create a specific product they want, sure, but why spend taxes on government-supported art, or arts education for that matter? Well, we know why. It's important. Or might be, or will be, or something. We know as those who have chosen the mantle of artist that this is true, but it's hard to come up with convincing arguments without concrete evidence to back us up. We're like dentists without the existence of cavities to prove us unequivocally right. We have tests and data and surveys and studies that all indicate the benefits of the arts, but nothing as compelling as being able to point to a graph that says, look, all artists are rich. We live in a time and a place where financial success is viewed by most as the only definitive form of success. If art was not running wild in the world, merely living in captivity in museums, or worse, we would all suffer. We know this. But we must figure out a way to explain it, to prove it, and accept that it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to make money doing it. Perhaps we are just the caretakers. Perhaps we are doomed to a time and a place where the work we are called to do will remain unappreciated. We may always be undervalued and underpaid. But if there comes a time where empathy, intellect, compassion, beauty, humor, and passion are once more valued, we will have been the light bearers through the darkness, the guardians of the craft, preserving it from being lost. Perhaps that's enough.
There are three pieces of technology that shaped my entire life as an artist. 1, a VHS camcorder. 2, the internet. And 3, the copy machine. Now, this is in no particular order, of course, but these three technologies came together in a perfect storm in a crucial time for me between the age of 11 and 13. You see, I wanted to act in movies, and it turns out that having a camcorder is a pretty good way to start. Me and my friends would tape our own TV shows and movies, and we would premiere them at someone's house and then screen them at everyone else's house, one living room at a time. Having a camcorder and what seemed like an unlimited supply of VHS tape taught me how to set up shots, where to cut, and how a 3-minute movie can take an entire day of summer vacation to create. I was a big fan of comic books at an early age, and at some point, a crucial piece of technology entered my life, one I referenced earlier, the copy machine. See, no particular order. Anyway, the copy machine wasn't anywhere nearly as fancy as you would find in a modern-day office shop like a FedEx or anything. No, this was a good old black and white copier that didn't really do photos well. In fact, it made them look like shiny black squares. It made the entire page completely smooth to the touch, and if you squinted, you could sometimes tell that the lighter shade of gray in one corner is Grandpa, and the other smudge is a lamp. See, I was drawing cartoons. Well, I was drawing a whole comic book one day when my dad took the pages to his work and photocopied them while no bosses were looking. When he came back, I trimmed it, I stapled it, and I had published my first comic. It dawned on me that if I could make more, if I could give them out to my friends, maybe I could, ask for a quarter or something like that, and so on and so on, I would be a producer of comics. And I loved it. Flash forward to over a decade later. It's 4 a.m. I was in what is now a FedEx office and was back then Kinko's, back when my local branch was open 24 hours. The point is, I was at a copy shop. I had been furiously working away at 3 copy machines, experimenting on publishing a better version of basically the same comic that I worked on 10 years ago. Some things never change, I suppose. I had updated the story, the art, I learned how much it cost to do color covers, I learned the weird trick to cut them exactly right by hand with a paper trimmer, and I learned that secret to getting the books full size, 11 by 17 paper, trimmed and bound using a long reach stapler. I am still infatuated with long-reach staplers. Anyhow, the manager was working on some kind of project when I asked him some questions about the color copier. How to do some strange setting in my obsessive quest to get the book just right. Much to my surprise, he invited me into the main employee work floor and let me use their software and their copiers to do a direct laser print rather than copying the colored cover that I had created, first by hand drawing it, teaching myself Photoshop, printing it on the inkjet printer at home, and copying it on the machine, blah, 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 blah. Laser printing was much, much better. I experimented forever, and surely I ran up a ridiculous bill at this place. Dreadfully, I walked up to pay my tab. I said I was ready. And my jaw dropped when the manager told me not to worry about it, that it was all on the house. And he sent me on my way with a very, very slick-looking finished book. I felt like I had passed some sort of final exam in adapting my artistic process to take full advantage of the technology that was available to me. I walked out of that store with a PhD in how to make comic books on a copy machine. I was learning another piece of the distribution puzzle. It was a little bit like screening home movies at friends' houses, but better, because with comic books, the sets could be as elaborate as I wanted, and I could draw anything I wanted, and the only budget I had, basically, was how many pages I could afford to run off the copier. Even better if the manager says they're free, right? Okay, flashback a little bit to when my family finally got internet access. Man, that sounds a little bit like my mom talking about getting her first TV. Anyway, through the internet, I learned just how many more people were out there, total strangers that I could connect to and talk with, and I even got a job with some guy in Utah. Now, keep in mind, I was in Georgia, drawing comics. And as a teenager in Georgia, I was drawing comics for someone across the country. I learned about webcomics and that anything I did could be put up on the internet and be seen by more people than any living room, movie screen, or local comic book shop could ever reach. I had finally found the place to distribute my work. I had no idea yet how to use it to my full potential, but neither did anybody else. Yet. I was still acting. In fact, it became my full-time job for a while, and for the most part still is today. I mean, I have an agent, I've done some TV work, and that's great. I say for the most part because as times have changed, so have my tools, and so has the work that has to go into distributing that work once it's created. My big VHS camcorder is sized down. It's become a slick digital Canon DSLR with HD video. I still produce my own movies, TV shows, and so on, but they're funded via things like Kickstarter and distributed in places like YouTube, Vimeo, and so on, and sometimes even paid for by PayPal or some ad revenue. Copy machine is still a copy machine, but mostly I don't print comics anymore. I put them out on e-readers like Kindle. Kindle is black and white, like a copy machine print. So I use many of the same tricks I used on copy machines for publishing Kindle books, including leaving a lot of black on the pages, because on copy machines, it left the pages glossy, and eventually, leaving a lot of black on the pages became sort of an artistic style of mine that I use to focus the subject of the panel, and lets me avoid having to draw those pesky backgrounds, because they involve things like perspective, and detail, and work. The internet is still as vast a landscape as I remember when I was a child, only now a lot of the how questions about distributing content have been answered. The new questions are all about how to get people to choose your content over the almost limitless options that are out there now. See, part of being an actor now, or an artist of any kind really, is that you are expected to create or participate in self-produced projects, the kind that weren't really possible 20 years ago due to cost and the need for a distributor. Times have changed. To get an agent, I had to have a reel consisting of short films that I did with other people who were, you guessed it, self-producing. To get a book deal now, it seems often you need to already have a following on a popular social media website, which you probably got because you have a good blog. And guess what? If you do want to self-publish, you can, and for the big retailers that are out there too, not just running off copies for your mom's basement, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc., etc. The artists of today are starting with these advantages of distribution and lower cost and a vast array of tools built into their working life. There's a lot of noise out there, but if the work is good, it can, as the kids say, go viral. Do the kids say that, or only buzzwordy internet marketers? Anyway, a comic strip can be written, drawn, formatted, advertised, and published on a smartphone. A little cramped, but it can be done. A movie can be shot, edited, and distributed on that same smartphone. The tools are there. The technology makes it possible, and it's up to the artist, in my opinion, to learn as much as possible about the technology they can use to create and distribute the art, to really obsess over it so that they can make informed choices about how to use the technology to its fullest potential, so that the artist can forget about the technology and just get down to creating the art. Computer technology is a tool, no different than a pen, a canvas, a lens, or brush. Learn how to use it, and then get it out of the way so that you can get to work. Create your piece. And once you're done, take a look at your work and consider clicking share. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
A few years ago, I was working a theatrical booking convention. It was a place that our touring company went to drum up business for our regional children's theater productions. That next season, we were producing The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So I was dressed as Huck and walking around the expo hall, barefoot mind you, speaking with other vendors and directing potential clients to our booth, when a young lady walked up to me and gave me a bumper sticker that read, "Art is not a thing, it is a way." I loved that quote, but at the time I didn't know what the hell it meant. And I've kept that bumper sticker for years, along with many other sacred objects, knowing that it must be important, if only I could decipher what it meant for me and my life. I eventually found the source of this wisdom was Elbert Hubbard, an American writer, artist, and philosopher. Okay, not a bad start, okay. He was also a self-described socialist and anarchist. All right, a rebel that shunned material wealth in favor of a pure, artistic ideal. A firm bedrock on which generations of independent artists could throw off the burden of money and focus on creating deep and introspective works of what? He created a publishing house and toured the country as a popular lecturer? He tempered his socialist worldview with an ardent defense of free enterprise and American know-how? He and his second wife died during the sinking of the luxury liner, the RMS Lusitania, in 1915? How the hell did he even afford a ticket? You're telling me that my hero, who coined the most concise, albeit enigmatic description of art, is a sellout? Great. Here I am, pining for that one pure beacon of artistry. And I find out that he was no better than those hack writers that crank out another horror franchise reboot, or the painters that license their works to be duplicated for hotel rooms. But are all commercial endeavors completely devoid of art? Does one truly have to give up one's integrity to achieve success? Popular art is nothing new. If we apply the accepted notions about art and commercialism to Shakespeare, why, he'd be reviled by critics of the true artist as a hack. He wrote dramas, King Lear, romantic comedies, A Midsummer Night's Dream, even sequels, Henry VI, Part 3, Revenge of the Fallen. Looking historically at the artistic fields of painting, sculpture, theater, and music within the European tradition, all of these artistic endeavors were subsidized by the church or by the nobility, and thus many of our revered artists from these eras would possibly be accused of being sellouts today. For comparison, one needs only to replace the word church with Paramount Pictures, or Shakespeare with Michael Bay. Even the art of writing is a Johnny-come-lately to the common man. Before Gutenberg's printing press made it possible to print many copies of the same text speedily, there was little reason to read, and even less reason to write, unless you were a scribe for the church or for the nobility. Thus, until 1450, the people who wrote for a living weren't writing creative material. They were copyists. And the people who were writing creative material weren't writing for money, since they were wealthy to begin with. Nowadays, commercialism means a lot of people have seen it, which means the creator was probably making some money off of the content. But once economics enters the picture, we now have an authority that we need to please. Not that there's anything wrong with that. After all, I like eating and making payments on my car insurance as much as the next guy. But from my perspective, economics tends to decline the quality of the product because the art itself isn't the focal point anymore. Economics is. And with the consumer already oversaturated with popular content, the message it's trying to send is often diluted or drowned out by the noise of all those others competing for your attention. Besides, comparing art to commercialism is like comparing apples to oranges, or screenplays to quarterly reports. But art goes where the money is. If you follow the history of art, you also follow the history of political power. Where is the nexus of culture? Babylonia, Egypt, Athens, Rome, Florence, London, Paris, New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo. These are, or have been, centers of culture. And not coincidentally, these are also centers of political and financial power. Artists are paid to tell everybody what beauty is, and to display that beauty for the glorification of their patrons. Oh no, I just entered another word into the debate. Beauty. Without putting a lot of qualifiers on it, I'm just going to say simply that beauty is the thing, the object we try to subjectively define. And art is the process in which its message is conveyed. The vehicle by which beauty comes into the world is art. Art creates beauty. But what is art? Coming back to the original quote, art is a way. Not the only way, but one way of communicating a simple truth or beauty. Much like the weekly discussions of seemingly unrelated ideas on this podcast, art is necessarily an intersection. It's an intersection between an object and the receiver of that object. The art is not created in the object, but in the mind of the receiver, making that object special, making it sacred. I mean, obviously, this object means something to the creator, but they want it to mean something to you too. To appreciate an art piece, one has to be able to understand and share the vocabulary applied. It's a dialogue. Thoughts and ideas are worthless unless shared. Without impact, they have no relevance. And when you think about it, commerce is also an act of exchange. The two have always and will always be linked. As anyone who has listened to our podcast this year knows, I have struggled to resolve my own inconsistencies with what qualifies as art. It is for me the inconsistencies that make that question relevant, and it is for me an answer that is ever evolving, and therefore alive. But for today, art is the way, beauty is the message, and commerce is the means by which that process happens. I wonder if I could make any money putting that on a bumper sticker.
Interesting speeches all around, I gotta say.
Interesting.
Yep.
That's one way to put it, I think.
Oh, yeah. What's that, Brockett?
No, please finish
all
what
right.
you were
Well,
going to
I-
say about the interesting speeches.
All right. Well, I was particularly taken with...
Now, look, I think what really we need to focus on about this particular set of speeches is, sure, they all made points, but
Right.
everybody can make points. My problem is that they all seem to be speaking into microphones. Are they not confident enough to approach the American people?
They started this podcast on a bunch of headsets, all right? Now they've got microphones. That shows a progress in the process and a faith in the system.
Yeah.
But what keeps them from addressing the podcast citizens directly?
The internet.
Clearly, our friend does not have a understanding of how the internet works.
I would have to agree.
Yes.
It's a series of shouting tubes.
Yeah.
I
made
have
out of
heard this
paper.
before, and I say once again that you approach the internet the way you approach any other communication platform.
I shout at it. That's what I
should.
do.
Yes.
That's how you approach the internet. It's a series of shouting tubes in computer boxes.
You
And
are-
I shout at mine, and it yells out at yours. That's how it works. works.
You are quite loud.
Yes, this country was built on shouting.
Agreed. I believe all the candidates put forth, as we said earlier, interesting points, and it should be interesting to see how the policy changes depending upon which particular viewpoint comes out.
I do think we
strong over
put
the next
too
couple.
much of an emphasis on interesting in this discourse process. I think there's something to be said for inane banter.
Well, I like potato chips. I think Gotlieb. I think Gotlieb is going to make a run for candidacy next year. I really do. After listening to his speech, I think he's gonna. I like potato chips.
You may be correct in your assessment. It should be interesting. Who knows? We may even shift over to a completely different system of determining who the president of the podcast may be.
That would be interesting if we could move out of the podcastual college. I think I'm having a stroke.
He liked potato chips a little too much.
I did. I think it's about time to wrap it up and getting the signal from the. It's about time to wrap. Yep, about time to wrap it up.
I want to make one final volley out there before we are forced to shut these microphones down. That we too are forced to approach the populace with, but I think the aardvarks were a really important element in all three speeches.
Yep, I would agree. Yep. All right. Final thoughts?
I have a meeting to be at shortly.
All right. Okay. Stay tuned. Up next, Really Slow Money will be coming on, followed by the 5 p.m. report. And we'd like to thank you for staying with News NN for this 2012 State of the Podcast coverage. I'm Matthew Perseus.
I am Michael Radow.
And I'm Brockett Coolidge.
All right. And we'll see you next time. Banter.